Ayy, look, yeah, ayy. I'm in the lab like Dexter, brand new batch he tested. I'm with all the extras, don't try and bitch, I'm pressure. I'm the type to step on steppers, I'm the type to step on steppers. I'm the type to step on steppers, I'm the type to step on steppers.
We'll go ahead and first start off with Daniel Jones, a guy that we talked about in our last episode. Daniel Jones and the New York Giants were able to agree on a contract extension, 4 years, $160 million. He agreed on this deal right before the deadline on Tuesday. Now, the question that I pose to you guys: did the Giants overpay for Daniel Jones?
What is that? 40 mil a year?
$40 million a year.
Man, I still think it's an overpay because it's like what is the ceiling and like what is the expectation for Daniel Jones? I feel like they were gonna have to pay him. But like now, what does this set the expectation to for Daniel Jones? What are you looking for? Because what Kirk Cousins makes, I think 35 mil a year, so that's like roughly 5 million more than him.
Derek Carr made 37.
Yeah, so that's about the range that Daniel Jones is in, basically now. So, like, what is the expectation now for Daniel Jones? Are you expecting him to when you pay 40 million a year to a quarterback? I believe the expectation should be that he elevates the offense to it being, a Super Bowl type of team, even if there isn't a Super Bowl roster on him, obviously. But the expectation is down the line that that's a ceiling for him. That's where he's gonna lead you to. And when you pay a quarterback that much, like part of me just feels like that's a complete overpay. I just don't see that with Daniel Jones. I think Daniel Jones can end up being a solid quarterback, maybe win a playoff game just like he did against Minnesota. But he's not going to end up being a quarterback that I feel like your offense should be tailored around and that you can build an entire team around. I just feel like the qualities that he has as a quarterback, they're just not enough for me to justify paying 40 million. I think 40 million is a complete overpay for someone like Daniel Jones. People said that about Kirk Cousins, but Kirk Cousins, at least he's a quarterback that I can see throwing 35 touchdowns a year, 32. He's thrown 30. That's just he's always posted good numbers. His issue has always just been showing up in big games and whatnot. But with Daniel Jones, do we even see 30 touchdowns on the card for him? Do we see him being able to put up numbers like that? So that's just how I see. I think that's an overpay for him.
Yeah, I agree with you. For me, like the criteria for a guy to get $40 million, like I need 35 plus touchdowns. I'm not gonna lie. I need 4,000 to 4,500 yards. That 35 pass touchdowns, that gotta be the threshold. If you're getting paid 40 mil, you gotta be playing like Mahomes, Burrow, Herbert, Allen, Lamar, those type of quarterbacks. Like I'm not sitting here saying Jones is a bad quarterback, but for him to have 15 touchdowns passing and to grab 40 mil off the board like that, I don't know. To me, it doesn't sit right. Although he played fantastic this year, it was a great game managing quarterback and everything, but I gotta find me a superstar if I'm paying somebody 40 mil. Like Russell Wilson getting more than 40, Kyler Murray's up there. Those guys, I feel like they don't deserve it. They're more in like the $30 million tier where, they're sitting comfortable in the middle of the pack. But for a guy to get 40 mil and to say, hey, I'm one of the best quarterbacks in the league, that's not true to me. So it doesn't sit well with me. I feel like, he came up, he finessed just because of, Dabo and him. They had a nice year together. They came up together. It was a 1-year stint, but he carried him to the playoffs. And they won the playoff game, so that's going to get you paid now in NFL. I don't think back in the day people would get paid like that, but I got to see more from him. I got to see 30 touchdowns. I got to see a consistent multiple years for him to deserve 40 mil. To say he got 40 mil this year just based off this one season, not compared to the other seasons that he had, which has been terrible compared to this one, is crazy. So for him to earn it off just 1 year, it don't sit right with me.
Yeah, I mean, for him to get a contract like this, it's just something you laugh at. Like you look at when you're paying all this money to your franchise quarterback, quote unquote, for Daniel Jones, you gotta look at the body of work. Like you can't just have a 1 year, one solid good year, and then demand all this money from teams in the market and force your franchise's hand. When we look at Daniel Jones, coming into the league, after his first year, he threw, 24 touchdowns and 12 interceptions. But, of course, he had a lot of issues with turnovers. He couldn't keep the ball out of harm's way. He had a lot of fumbling. He had a lot of fumbles. a lot of interceptions, and they weren't playing winning football, so they weren't winning a lot of games. And then of course the 2 following years after that, pretty much the same thing. The New York Giants were a terrible football team, and then all of a sudden Brian Dable comes in and he gets Daniel Jones to play the type of football that he wants him to play, and then he limits the turnovers, and then he has a successful season. But I agree with all of you guys, both of you guys, man. This guy he does not deserve $40 million per year. It doesn't make any sense. Now, when you look at the quarterback market, of course, the money the money's different now than it was 10 years ago. Guys who got 30 million 5-7 years ago. Those guys were the highest paid quarterbacks in the league, but not 30 million is like this. It's a starting point for every conversation for every quarterback in the league now. If you're good and you have a solid couple of good years under your resume, you're demanding 30 mil from your front office. But Daniel Jones, he pretty much forced the Giants. He forced their hand because he came into negotiations saying, I want 45 plus million. And, the Giants didn't necessarily, test his gangster, to be honest, pretty much. Like, they should have just told Daniel Jones, you want 45 million? Cool. This is what we can do to you. We can do something similar to what the Baltimore Ravens did to Lamar Jackson. We'll get to him in a little bit, but slap on a non-exclusive franchise tag on you where you're playing 1 year for maybe $30 million, but you have the freedom to go out and test the market and see what you're really worth. And if you get an offer that's, $45 million a year, then so be it. Then you pack your bags from New York, and the Giants are going to be okay. It was a good time, and we're not going to go ahead and match that offer. But, if you get anything less than that, something that's in our range that we can match, then we'll go ahead and match that. And if you end up walking, we get some compensation in return. But for the Giants to not even take that route and just to, sit there and negotiate with him from $45 million all the way down to 40, of course, $5 million is not that big of a difference, when you're a quarterback in the NFL, and it's obviously to the average person, yeah, but not to NFL players. They're making millions of dollars per game. So when you look at the quarterbacks across the league right now, Kirk Cousins is going into this year getting paid $40 million on a 1-year deal. I believe Geno Smith somewhere around the range of $30 to $35 million a year. Derek Carr getting paid 37. So, I think Daniel Jones, when it comes to, in terms of being in that tier of quarterbacks, yes, he's in that tier of quarterbacks, but, it's just crazy for him to be getting $40 million and he hasn't had a 30 touchdown season yet, and you saw him tear apart my Minnesota Vikings, right? And we had no answer for him pretty much. He was running the ball. He was throwing the ball in the air, and we couldn't necessarily stop them whatsoever. But then we saw his true colors show when he played, the division rival against the Philadelphia Eagles. Is that the real Daniel Jones? Like, who is Daniel Jones as a quarterback? Is he the guy that stepped up against the Minnesota Vikings, or is he the quarterback that shrunk when the lights were the brightest against the Eagles? I just don't know who Daniel Jones is as a quarterback in this league. Now, I've been very critical of Daniel Jones. I'm not the biggest Daniel Jones guy. I have given him praise throughout this past season, when the Giants were doing well, but I have given him some heat when they weren't playing so well. And pretty much leading all the way up until this season, I've been very, very critical about him. But, for him to get 40 plus million and the Giants to not even, test him out in the market, it's just a missed opportunity for the Giants. And now they put themselves in a position where they got to force themselves to believe that Daniel Jones is going to be their quarterback for the future. They got to force themselves to believe that he's going to be the guy that leads them to the Super Bowl. That's what their GM said when they interviewed him the other day. They asked him a question. They said, "Yo, do you believe that Daniel Jones can take you to the promised land and win you a Super Bowl?" And he said, yes. He was flat out honest with himself. He's like, I believe that Daniel Jones can lead us to the promised land and he can win a Super Bowl. And I believe in his heart of hearts, he doesn't believe that with the way this roster is constructed right now. And now you move on from Daniel Jones. You got to go ahead and deal with another situation on your hands where you slap the franchise tag on Saquon Barkley that just went under the radar with this Daniel Jones news. And now you don't necessarily know if you have a running back for this upcoming year, because I don't believe that Saquon Barkley is going to end up playing on a franchise tag. And I'm not too sure whether it's an exclusive franchise tag or a non-exclusive franchise tag. But at the end of the day, regardless, Saquon Barkley is looking to get paid. And now you have to go ahead and pay him. And when you go ahead and pay Saquon Barkley, where's the rest of the money going to go? Is it going to go to your defense? Is it going to go to your skill positions on offense? The wide receiver room is pretty much the bottom tier in this league. Like, you have Isaiah Hodgins going out there, and you have Darius Slane. I mean, those guys aren't going to win you Super Bowls. They might win you a couple playoff games. I mean, they're able to win a playoff game against my Minnesota Vikings, but they're not going to go ahead and win you a Super Bowl. And that's the ultimate goal in the NFL. So I believe this is a complete big overpay for the Giants. And I feel like 2 to 3 years from now down the road, they're going to regret this signing heavily. And, you know, coming into this year, the range for Daniel Jones is supposed to be a two-year deal somewhere around the range of $30 to $35 million. And for Daniel Jones to, you know, not have to worry about testing the market to see where he's at in terms of value, and for him to get $40 million just off the Giants alone, he's a happy man. He's sleeping on it for sure with a smile on his face, because now the Giants have to pay this guy $40 million. And what happens if the Giants aren't necessarily a good team for, you know, the next 2 or 3 years? Now you put yourself in a position where, you know, you got to go ahead and go back into the draft. You got to go ahead and draft another guy and hope that he ends up panning out right for you. And it's going to be interesting to see how this whole thing pans out for them. And like I said, I do think they're going to regret this move heavily, because Daniel Jones getting paid $40 million. I mean, for me, it definitely does not sit right with me. There's a lot of better quarterbacks in this league that deserve to get paid. And if you're going to pay a guy $40 million, he better, you know, put me in the best position to win a Super Bowl. I just don't think that's the case with Daniel Jones.
Record a new hit, then we making us a film. Wouldn't sign a deal if I got a couple mil. Been in the lab, now they throwing out deals. Me and now Lakes, now that's overkill.